helps to know how Bitcoin works by knowing what Bitcoin really is. The intended purpose of Bitcoin was to create something rare, something valuable, something that was dispersed across a large population, and something that was freely attainable so that people could make transactions with it. So Bitcoin really is it really acts more as a currency, even though a lot of from the legal side of things, they look at it more of as an asset. But it was intended originally to be more of a currency, something that could be used. And it helps to know how Bitcoin works when you realize that Bitcoin is really a software. It's not a bank. It's not really, it's not a physical, tangible currency. It's a digital currency. And the intention behind Bitcoin was to limit the amount of Bitcoin in existence to 21 million. So built into the software is a maximum. And this 21 million makes Bitcoin rare on a certain level because the money supply is essentially programmed in. So if you're running a valid version of the Bitcoin software, you're limited to 21 million. So to explain how Bitcoin works, you have to realize that Bitcoin was not, the way Bitcoin was distributed to society is through a process called mining. And what happens is there's a certain amount of Bitcoin that are released to the world every 10 minutes. Now, how that 10 minutes works is through a process called mining, and it has to do with a thing called difficulty. So if you want to start at the beginning of how Bitcoin works, you have to think about difficulty. Difficulty is simply a low number. And what it is that when there are 100 computers online and they are all mining for Bitcoin, and what mining is simply throwing random numbers at an encryption algorithm, and this encryption algorithm will return a new number that is unpredictable. So they're essentially guessing. I'm going to throw this number at this algorithm, out comes a new number. Well, the difficulty number is a low number, and your result is going to be any random number. If it just so happens that you are the lucky one and your number that comes back is lower than the difficulty number, then you earn the block reward. And the block reward originally was 50 Bitcoin. So by mining and finding a number smaller than the difficulty number, you earned 50 Bitcoin. So every 4 years, this reward drops in half, goes down to 25, and then 12 and a half. And then it just continues to get smaller and smaller for 100 and some odd years until the last 21 millionth Bitcoin has been mined. So this difficulty ensures that transactions are processed in a 10-minute, roughly 10-minute average. Well, if it just so happens that our 100 computers that are mining multiplies by 10, now there's 1,000 computers finding this. Well, if the difficulty number remains the same, the odds of somebody finding a smaller number with 10 times the amount of computing power is 10 times as fast. So you should be able to find a smaller number every 1 minute. So to guard against this, there's an adjustment that happens, and every 2 weeks, roughly 2 weeks, there's an adjustment that happens. It's a certain amount of blocks. I just forget the number off the top of my head. But what happens is that it will adjust, and the new difficulty number will be 10 times smaller. And so now that the 1,000 computers are still online, it still takes 10 minutes for that new increased amount of transaction power to find a smaller number. Well, finding the smaller number is rewarded by this block of Bitcoin. But there's also a side benefit. Finding a block also is the process of compiling and validating transactions. So think of a block as a box of checks. And what really happens is when I want to send Bitcoin to someone else, I submit my transaction to the blockchain, and the miners see all of these unconfirmed transactions. They're just essentially checks that are waiting to be validated. And the miner that solves the block, that's the terminology for finding the smaller number, they look at all of the checks and they say, okay, I'm going to order these checks from the highest fee to the lowest so that I can make an additional benefit of the fees from these transactions. And I will package this into the block if I'm lucky enough to find that smaller number. So these checks are then essentially validated, and when that block is solved, they submit the block with the transactions all validated, and every other miner is able to look at that block and say, yep, he guessed this, the outcome was that, it is definitely lower than the difficulty number, and all of these transactions have been properly vetted, so we accept this new block. And then everyone keeps searching for the next one. And every time someone searches for the next block, they're also validating all of the past blocks and ensuring that they're correct. So every new block, so say my transaction is in a block, and then it gets accepted by the miners. Well, that is one confirmation. The next block that happens validates my previous block and also a new one. Now my transaction has two confirmations. The more confirmations, the more irreversible those transactions are. If two blocks are found at the same time, it goes to the longest chain, and it essentially nullifies those previous transactions. That's why it's risky to accept a transaction on the first block. So, simply put, how Bitcoin works is essentially a method to distribute Bitcoin to the world in a way that we're still limiting it to 21 million, but half of that is released to the world in the first 4 years. 4 years later, a quarter is released. Next 4 years, an eighth, and then a 16th, and then a 32nd, and it's scheduled out. So everybody that's running a valid version of Bitcoin agrees that all of this makes sense. So that's how it's distributed. How do transactions get started? Well, everybody that downloads a wallet, if it's essentially a full node wallet, meaning that wallet has downloaded the entire history of all the blockchain that has ever existed, that wallet essentially has a copy of the database. So people talk about blockchain as a unit, but what it really is in layman's terms is simply a database. It's a database of all the transactions that have ever happened since those coins were originally mined. Well, everyone that's running a wallet has a copy of this database. This enables Bitcoin to be completely decentralized. So there's not one single source of truth. Everybody has a source of truth. So when I'm running my wallet, I have my own version of all of the transactions that have ever occurred. Well, that makes Bitcoin very, very difficult to take down. No central authority can be raided, or a government can't come in and shut down a server or something and just completely wipe it off the map. Everybody running a wallet is essentially reinforcing and decentralizing this, how Bitcoin, the existence of Bitcoin. So when I open my wallet, once my wallet has downloaded the blockchain, so it's essentially synced to the network, I am now able to send my Bitcoin. And how a wallet participates in this economy is that, say I have Bitcoin in my wallet and I want to send them out. Well, The wallet is essentially it's not a perfect term. It's really software, and the wallet represents permission to send Bitcoin from my specific private key. So when I want to send coins to somebody else, they give me their public wallet address. So then I would go to my wallet and I would put in their public wallet address, and I would specify how many Bitcoin I want to send. And then when I send it, my transaction is validated by my own private key. And so this transaction is submitted to the blockchain, where the miners are able to validate that, yes, I do have permission to send it. And the neat thing about Bitcoin is that I can create, so every public wallet address is generated from a private wallet address, which is essentially your private key. And I can generate a public address that others can validate without me revealing my private key. So people can say, yes, this, because of how this wallet is generated, or this address is generated, we can tell that you know what the private key is. But it's a way of doing it without revealing that. So that way everybody has their own secret private key, and they can still send transactions out onto the public blockchain. And then they're all validated. If you ever reveal your private key, you essentially have lost control of your coins, because now somebody else has permission to send your coins. That's why we keep our private keys private. So I hope that helps to clarify how Bitcoin works. There are different pieces to it. There are miners that validate transactions. There are users that are out in the industry that are maintaining the network by having a full node running to validate and decentralize the database. And as people participate in the economy and as funds flow back and forth, there are ebbs and flows. There are fees go up, fees go down, and it's open and public to all. If anybody wants to get involved in Bitcoin, they simply need to download a Bitcoin wallet from bitcoin.org. My favorite method of storing Bitcoin is not online. It's using a hardware wallet, because as I was mentioning how a wallet works, is your wallet is really permission to send the coin. Your actual Bitcoin exists on the blockchain. I don't need to be online. My wallet doesn't have to be online all the time in order for me to retain my coins, because everybody has a copy of the blockchain, and my coins exist on the blockchain. I can log in once or submit a transaction, and it can submit movement from my address to someone else, and everyone can validate that it's a valid transaction, and off they go. I don't need my wallet online for that. But anyway, if you need more information, or if you'd like more clarification, you can certainly reach out to us. Like I say, I'm the CEO of coinbook.com. We're a Bitcoin exchange, helps people get involved without having to understand how mining works and all of that stuff. You can just get an account and buy it straight off of the market from other people that have already mined it or have bought themselves. And so we kind of make it easy. But reach out to us, send us a support ticket if you want clarification, or if you have any questions. We'd be happy to help you out. We're just glad to be part of the community and this industry, because it is absolutely amazing how Bitcoin works and what it's doing to change the world.